change this picture because I'm getting annoyed with my mouth.
I know, we'll have to get another photo. Hello. If you see this, please let us know where you're coming from. You're getting started in just a second. Hit that heart. Let us know where you're coming from. We're just waiting till we get the signal that we are live in all locations.
Zoom, zoom.
Zoom. Yes. All right. Cool. All right. It looks like we are live.
Woohoo!
Ooh, all right. Here we go. Boom. Hi, everyone.
Hey, guys!
It is Gary and April. We are back for another Quickie. This is number 7.
Ooh, lucky.
Lucky number 7. And we are going to be talking about that inner voice in your head, that inner critic. We're going to be busting through that with 3 amazing tips. Let's get into it, April. How about you kick us off?
Shall we? Okay. Tip number 1. Okay, so a lot of times we think about, we're working on something and we have, we get excited and we start moving forward towards the process, like through the process, and all of a sudden we get stopped and we start to feel fear. We start to feel anxiety. We start to almost want to trace back our steps and stop. Do you ever feel that way? I think that's our inner critic talking, right? Those deep things that are saying like, you suck. Like, this is never going to work. Like, are you crazy? So we're trying to figure out how to make that stop, because we know that these thoughts are always going to creep up. It's just part of our nature. Fear is scary, but it's what helps us grow. So the first thing that I always say when we're talking about that inner critic is to stop yourself when you start to feel that self-doubt and ask, how true is this? Right? Because a lot of times I'll say like, but nobody knows you, so who cares? Like, you just, you're not going to be able to do that. And I have to trace my steps back and say, how true is this? And maybe it might be slightly true, or maybe it's completely untrue, but it at least will unlock some further conversation instead of stopping you from completely being dead in your tracks, right?
Word.
I just feel like if you are able to stop yourself and ask this question and have this dialogue with yourself, you can also, when you see other friends who are starting to fall down this path, you can just stop and say, hold on a second, how true is this? And it will just cause them to pause and reflect, and maybe they'll come up with more excuses, but at least it starts this dialogue and prevents them from just completely quitting. Do you agree on that, Gary?
Agree 110%. It's really interesting about that inner critic, and we'll talk about the tip number 2. This is a good segue into it, but it just sort of pops up, and it's almost like there's a little person inside of our head, and anytime we have those situations pop up, those triggering situations, they're like, hey, you remember this time? You remember this time? You remember this time? And it can't be true 100%. So, to that point, ask yourself, is this true all the time, every day, always? Yes, it may have been true once or twice. Maybe you weren't your best, but it's not always true. So best way to bust those judgy critics and those limiting beliefs is, to ask it, how true is this?
Yes.
An amazing segue into tip number 2. And this is a really fun, playful way to, start to bust out this critic. And I got this from a number of mentors, one in particular, Elizabeth Gilbert, in her book, Big Magic, when she's talking about fear and how fear can get in the way of creativity. And this is a fun thing that you can do, is you can give it a name and talk to it. I've had many names for it, but sometimes I call it Eugene. Eugene's my middle name, and it sounds like a really dorky sort of name, so it makes me laugh every time I say it. So I'm like, hey, Eugene, what's up? And it's really interesting because at the end of the day, whether it's fear, uncertainty, it's just your way of trying to protect yourself. And so by giving it a name and having a conversation with it, sometimes that's just enough to like give your unconscious mind a break. And like that, you can just keep going. And in that book, Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert, she's talking about fear, and she says, fear is always going to be there. And it's just like that movie Inside Out, where they have the little characters inside of your head. And so if you just give it a name and say, hey, I know you're trying to protect me. I know you just want the best for me. But right now, me and creativity, we got this. You're allowed to come along for the ride, but you got to sit in the back. You can't even be in the front seat. And yeah, so it's just an easy way of putting those judgy thoughts at bay. What are your thoughts, Apryl?
I love that. And, as part of the coaching program that I went through, we talked a lot about they call the inner critic the gremlin. And we had to create these, like a visual representation of our gremlins. And it was very interesting. We had to kind of give it a name and a personality. And then the similar thing where you kind of create a relationship with it, understanding that it's just there to protect you, and it's going, because it doesn't want to hurt you, right? I mean, it doesn't want you to fail, but sometimes those things that sometimes you're not going to fail, and you don't want your critic to be the only voice in the room. So you want the inside out happy character to shine every once in a while. So
Yes.
Shall we go to the third tip?
Yes. Before we get to the third tip, just want to acknowledge buddy Steve, who's chiming in on the LinkedIn side. He has a really good point that fear leads to the dark side. So if you follow Star Wars, Yoda talks about that. Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering. And suffering is a choice. So I just want to throw that out there. And it's a great sort of pivot to tip number 3, which is
pivot. If you are a Friends fanatic like I am, this was really fun. Make this as our third tip, because I just keep thinking about that couch that would not go up the stairs. And I think that it's a good analogy for just your inner critic, right? If you are just struggling to get that up there, I don't even know what happened in that show after. Did they even get it up there at any point? But pivot, right? In the context of what we're talking about, take a break, do something different. If you are, working on something big, and instead of just stopping dead in your tracks, you're starting to hit a wall and you're doing it over and over again, take a break from it, walk away, do something else. And it could be something as simple as completely just taking a break and working on another project that is just, that has just as much importance, or will help you kind of get your motivation and your momentum going again. Or it could be a little play break. It could just be, 5 minutes, just walk around in circles in your room and just get yourself back to going, and then sit down. Because sometimes switching gears will give you that right jump start to look at it again. Because when we start to get too much into our thoughts, then all of a sudden we are blocked and we can't see anything. So that pivot is huge. Gary, you agree? I'm assuming, because that's what we agree. Right. Number 3.
No, I agree. And just giving yourself, it's just that mental, we call it, in these technical terms, it's not even coming to me, but by getting up, there we go. Already, pattern interrupt. Thank you. That's the whole idea of play. I don't know about you. Every time I feel stuck, I feel like the adult in me was like, oh, push through it. However, every time I do something different, whether it's get up and walk around, or go for a drive, or just have a quick game of anything, your brain is still working on it, but it gives you that refresher. And usually you come to your senses and you let the emotions sort of calm down, and then you allow yourself to be more logical and realize that this is just that fight or flight sensation that's going through your brain. Boom. So those are our 3 tips. Just to review, number 1, how true is it? Number 2, name that critic, have a conversation with it, and all else fails, pivot.
Perfect.
So, right? So let us know in the comments. Do you have any tips? What's up to my girl Kirsten out there? She loves the Yoda tips. Steve's been along for the journey the whole time. If you what are your thoughts on all of this? Let us know in the comments. We're going to be around replying. Forgive us for this sort of delay in the interwebs. So what we're saying is probably a good 45 seconds delay. So we are sorry if we miss anything that you say live, but we are still going to be around. And Apryl, how about you give them a quick overview of the ASC? So if they like what they hear and they want to hang out with us a little bit more.
Yeah, Gary and I are the success team for the Accountability Success Circle, which is a program that has been around for 2 years that just helps promote people living happy, productive, fun lives. So having more fun and getting stuff done in a way that leads us to the success that we all crave and doing things on our terms. So if you're interested in just, you're thinking, what the heck is that program? Go ahead and I think Gary's going to put the the link right below us. So go ahead and check out that link. Just if you have any questions about it, then just feel free. But otherwise, next week we'll be back with these tips because we want to be able to share with you some of the things that we have in conversations with many people in our community, just as different ways to kind of just keep pushing and keep moving forward and becoming that badass success that you always wanted to be. So thanks for checking us out.
Yes. See you next week.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, I'm gonna hit this button now. I'm really gonna hit it.
Beep.